Hello and welcome to Walking with the Word, Matthew 2. Um, you'll notice I'm not freezing on the top of a mountain this time. Instead, I'm sitting at home, which allows me to have a little bit of notes. I've got the scripture pulled up, and sort of again, the idea of this, right, is sort of like walking out and looking for lessons inside of the Bible. And I figured I would work through the New Testament. I'm not claiming to know it all. I'm not claiming to um, be a preacher or biblical scholar or anything like that. It's simply me reading through what I see in the book and then sort of sharing my thoughts and what lessons I draw or what meaning I think may be there but may not be so intuitive. Um, yeah, and so today is about Matthew 2. It's really funny. So two things. It's really funny because Patty and I were talking about recording reading books, and that way we can take and have those books or those videos to sort of share down with our kids and possibly our grandkids and so on. And we were talking about whether or not books were in the public domain so that we could store them on YouTube or if they had copyright and whatnot. And so we'll see how we work through that. But the funny part was for me, and related to this, was with Matthew 1, I was freezing on top of Mount Si. And two, like I was concerned that taking the time to read the book would be boring or people would be like, why am I wasting so much time? So the second part. I'm going to read Matthew 2, and then I'll put probably in the notes on Facebook and YouTube if you want to skip past the scripture part and get to the discussion part, then that'll be there as well. So with that, Matthew 2, the Magi and the Magi visit the Messiah. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he when he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will become a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for one child. For the child, as soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard from the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over a place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. After having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route, the escape to Egypt. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said. "Take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more." They returned to Nazareth. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead." She got up, took the child and his mother, So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus, I don't know, man, was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there, having been warned in a dream. He withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. So, um, so sort of what jumps out to you, or what sort of first jumped out at me, and then what were sort of the thoughts I had? Because obviously, like I've been thinking about this all week, sort of on and off. So, sort of two things. The two things jump out at me, right? Um, and this is probably, I would assume, often what people think of when they think of Matthew 2. So gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I found a bunch of articles online that talk about those. So, so what are they? Gold is obviously gold. Oftentimes, it's given to sort of represent rulers and the birth of rulers. So giving gold is like, hey, welcoming a new prince or king or whatever. Frankincense and myrrh are actually apparently like sap of trees that are sort of collected over time. I believe frankincense is often used as an incense because it smells really great, but it's also a way to sort of bless stuff. And so this is uh, thought to represent the holy aspect. And then myrrh is often used in embalming and sort of funeral rites. And so some articles online say that that's the connection. So welcoming welcoming the new ruler, celebrating his birth and sort of blessing it, or showing the holiness related to that, and then sort of a nod towards the future sacrifice of Jesus. I think that's interesting. I don't think it's the only thing to learn from Matthew 2. The other thing that might jump out to people, or I would assume is what people hone in on, is sort of Herod's fear, right? And his fear is very much focused on preserving what he has, and in that fear he does terrible things, right? Um, and so that's also possibly a lesson, right? When we focus too much on what Earth provides, then sometimes we'll do horrible things. We'll sin. Hopefully we never get to the extent of Herod's. But like when we focus um, on earthly things, that's the peril we face, right? Is to do things that are um, so far outside of what is righteous, what is holy, what is sharing love with one another. And so we talked about in Matthew 1 that one of the key premises is about love, and about love and progeny, like loving those around you, whether or not they're your blood. Uh, so what do I look at, or what do I see in Matthew 2, and sort of what stands out to me after sort of praying on it or meditating on it over the week? And I come away with three things. So the first is look up to find God. And so in in Matthew 2, obviously there's the Star of Bethlehem, and that's what they orient towards, or that's what they follow in order to find Jesus, to find a connection with God. Um, and that's important. But when you think about it, right, that's also that also plays out in a number of ways. Like when we get too excited about a current event, a political topic, etc., what we wind up doing is looking sort of I guess across the bow, like at the other side, and saying, "Oh, they're wrong and we're right," and trying to jockey for a position. But our orientation, our focus, is at somebody else, and not on love, and not on sort of righteousness. We often try and win a side or prove our side, when in reality, like it's probably better to accept perspectives from both sides and continue to focus on loving one another, on giving them space to express their thoughts, beliefs, concerns, and that doesn't always have to agree with us. The point is, um, if we orient our eyes towards God, towards Bible, towards love, then a lot of that stuff won't matter. A lot of it will sort of dissolve away. Um, so that was the first thought. The second thought was follow the lead of the wise men, right? So the wise men, the Magi, um, had audience with Herod. They had audience with the governor or the king or what I think he was king at the time, maybe King of Agrippa. I don't recall, but they had audience with him. So they were not just wise men; they were obviously rich and at least well known enough to travel across countries, to travel across great distance, and be welcomed by the king and let to go within his kingdom and find Jesus. And so, like, they have, uh, you should assume that they have a lot of power and a lot of wealth, and they sacrificed their audience with Herod to honor their faith, right? So they brought their gifts for Jesus, but two, they didn't pass back through Herod. They didn't go back and report to him. They didn't do as he asked. Instead, they sort of went and um, avoided that by going. I think in King James it might talk about going and seeing friends or family on the way out and sort of avoiding Herod, right? And so maybe that's part of the reason Herod was so pissed, and I don't know, but um, but sometimes, right, what the world is asking of us does not align to what Jesus or God would want. And so in those times, consider whether or not it's better to sort of um, ignore, avoid the confrontation, etc., with what people are demanding or what the government's demanding here on earth, and instead orient towards what's right in sort of the eternal sense or in a timeline much more than your time on earth. And then the third piece I get out of this, right? Um, God doesn't block maladies on earth. Sorry, let me put a note to come back to two. Um, yeah, God doesn't block maladies on earth. So, like, Herod's slaughter still happened, but his voice can be revealed and guide you if you listen. And so it's sort of, I guess I can hide the scripture. It's sort of saying that, hey, bad stuff is going to happen. And that's just sort of the reality of life. But if you listen close enough and listen to your heart, at least for me, that's where I experience um, a lot of I guess, the intuitions or the conversations I have with God. Um, if you learn to listen to that, then, like, you can avoid some of the maladies. You can avoid some of the terrible things that life will throw at you. You might not avoid them all, um, but orienting towards or listening to the voice is a value and something to a strength to build, almost like a muscle to build. And I think that's one of the things I draw out of this. And so, like, the note I put, right? How does this orient to the rest of the New Testament? When in Matthew 1, we talked about how it was a demonstration of love, and a love that sort of superseded the casual expectations, or like what often we would have thought about, right? Your direct descendants or your progeny, and all of a sudden there's a departure where you love somebody who's not your bloodline, love and protect. And so that kind of keeps with the commandments of the New Testament. And then when we think about following the lead of the wise men, right, it sort of sets this precedent. And the precedent is something um, like, be willing to sacrifice your status, be willing to give up some of your material wealth for the sake of um, for the sake of your faith, for the sake of following Jesus. And I think that's sort of a theme that we'll wind up seeing throughout the New Testament, right? Whether it's Matthew, which obviously this is the book he wrote, um, giving up his like his duties and his status in order to follow Jesus, or I mean, really, any of the disciples wound up sort of leaving the life that they knew in order to pursue a life that was sort of brought before them by Jesus. And so I think that's sort of it's almost like a what is it, topic paragraph or whatever. I forget writing from high school, but but like you sort of give the topic sentence or the idea that might continue throughout the book. And I feel like that's what Matthew 1 and Matthew 2 are doing, at least for me, or what I pull from them. Um, and so I that's sort of my that's sort of my read and thoughts um, on the book of Matthew. I almost had a panic there. I didn't remember if I hit start recording. So sorry. Uh, that's sort of my read on Matthew 2 and how that applies to me. And again, like I'm not saying that this is the right way to read it. It's just how I read it. And I think that the Bible is written in such a way that like you can read it at face value as a historical account and get value out of it. You can read it at the things that jump out, the real poignant um, moments, right? The gold, frankincense, and myrrh, Herod's fear, and um, how that sort of almost like transformed him into a monster or led him to greater sins. But there's also sort of underlying ideas that you can take and sort of distill in a sense and apply across time or across your life or directly to your life, right? You're never going to live 2,000 years ago. You're never going to be there with Jesus in the days that he lived, right? You, whether we'll see magi travel cross country to do something, like if we'll see a miracle or any of the miracles, again, I don't know. But there are sort of thematic ideas that we can pull out and very much can apply to the our lives, to our moment in time, right? And so I think for me, the three ones out of this were very much look up to find God, right? And stop trying to look at the things around you and build all this yeah, material wealth or like a collection of things to show off. Like that won't lead you um, to being fulfilled. Like realistically, like it's just not going to be the end all be all or the answer in the end. Follow the lead of the wise men, right? Um, be willing to sort of disobey or maybe um, disobey or maybe avoid um, things when the law would compel you to do is something that's against the values and very much the values of God, right? If somehow you're told you need to um, betray your neighbor and turn them in, that's probably something to turn away from, right? If it's um, now, don't get me wrong, if they're like doing egregious stuff or hurting others, then obviously that's a different thing. If it's your neighbor's not wearing a mask and like the government tells you, oh my God, everyone's got to wear a mask and shoot stuff into them, maybe that's a moment to just avoid that, right? Avoid that betrayal. And then the third is that God doesn't block these maladies, and so bad things are going to happen. Bad people exist, um, and temptation will always be there. And so um, it's sort of open yourself up to the voice of God and use that to guide you. Um, and sometimes it'll protect you or save you from maladies. Sometimes you're um, still going to run into them or be hit with them. Um, but again, orient up, look towards God, pray, and life will be all right. And that's what I have. That's that's all I have for Matthew book 2. Hopefully it was interesting, and maybe you learned a new perspective. Maybe this is all stuff people have already said a thousand times. I don't know. I'm sort of walking through it and sort of learning as I go, or spending time meditating on it as I go. And so it's yeah, I do so from a perspective of learning, not from a perspective of knowing it all. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey. And that's all I have. Thank you so much. See you next time on Matthew 3.